Welcome everyone. This video is CCBYNC. All right, today we are going to talk about the trig functions of any angle, of the entire unit circle actually. You may want to have your unit circle handy, either handmade or one that you got from the internet. Both ways are fine. So what we're going to talk about first are reference angles. And the smallest angle, the terminal side of a given angle makes with the x-axis is the reference angle. So it's always going to be whatever the angle is. So the green is the angle. Whatever the angle is, the quickest way to the x-axis, that's going to be your reference angle. And we use the notation theta prime, or with a little tick above it, to talk about the reference angle. In the first quadrant, they're the same. The angle is exactly the same. The second, we're going to have to do 180 minus to get our reference angle. The third one, we're going to have to do 180 plus, whatever the angle is, and minus 360. So let's jump into it. So let's start here. Graph each angle and identify its reference angle. So for part A, now 140 degrees, 180 degrees, right, is all the way back to here. So it's not quite there. About right there. So there's your 140 degrees. And the reference angle is going to be this angle right here. This is going to be our theta prime. The way I'm going to get that is I'm going to do 180 minus 140. So our reference angle in this case is 40 degrees. And that is right there. We're going to use the reference angle so that we can use our unit circle and our special triangles. Part B. We have that the angle is 240 degrees. Now 240 degrees is more than 180. But less than 270. So it's going to be in the third quadrant, it looks like to me. And our reference angle is going to be here. Theta prime. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 240 degrees and subtract 180 from that. 240 degrees, all of that minus the 180, and that's going to leave me with the red is the hope, minus 180. So our reference angle in this case is 60 degrees. That's right there. For our third graph, we have 380. Now 380 degrees is bigger than 360 degrees. So I'm going to go ahead, and so let's show what that looks like. This one goes all the way around and then still comes here. So this is 380. And the reference angle is going to be this angle right here. So theta prime. And I'm just going to take 380 and subtract 360. That's going to give me a reference angle of 20 degrees. So it's not too hard to find. You just have to kind of visualize it in your head. Know what quadrant you're in and everything. All right, let's do another example. Find the ordered pair for 240 degrees and use it to find the value of sine of 240 degrees. Now I want us to recall that y is the sine of theta. Theta in this case being 240 degrees. So we're actually going to use our unit circle. We are going to identify 240 degrees And note that the sine of 240 is going to be negative root 3 over 2. So the sine of 240 degrees, note we're in quadrant 3, so it should be negative. And that was negative root 3 over 2. Now it doesn't say, but we could find cosine as well. Cosine is going to be the x. Remember, x equals cosine theta. So the cosine of 240 degrees is the x coordinate here, negative 1/2 at 240. And we could find tangent and secant and cosecant and so on. All right, so our third example, we're going to find the exact value of sine and cosine of 290 degrees. Now, once again, that's y and that's x. But 1,290 degrees is way too big. I want to get it down between 0 and 360 degrees. So I'm just going to keep subtracting 360 degrees until we're between 0 and 360. So 1290 minus 360. Not good enough. Minus 360. Minus 360. Okay, so finally we are to an angle that is between 0 and 360. So to be clear, I used, 1290 minus 360 degrees to get 210. Now 210 degrees so here's 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, and 270. Now, if 270 is down here and 180 is here, that means I'm in quadrant 3 here. Where both x and y are negative. This is 210 degrees. And to point out, a reference angle is 30 degrees. Let me show you how we can use this. As long as we know that we're in quadrant 3 and that both x and y are negative, I can just use everything in quadrant 1 if I know the reference angle. Here's 30 degrees. There's sine and there's cosine. So sine of that angle is going to be a negative 1/2, right? Because we're actually in quadrant 3. Here's 210. Way over here. But if I just use the negative version of those two, I get the same thing. So for part A, the sine of 1,290 degrees is a negative 1/2. That's right there. Negative 1/2. Because we're actually over here in quadrant 3. Cosine of 1,290 degrees is the x coordinate, but negative. Not too bad. You just have to keep the signs straight. And when I say sine, I mean S-I-G-N-S. All right, what if we have negative angles? That's okay too. If 3 of them here, negative 45 degrees. Now, if you remember, a negative angle goes down instead of counterclockwise. So for part A, what we're going to have is a negative 45 degrees. So this is negative 45 degrees. Now you'll note its reference angle is also just 45 degrees. It's always positive. So there, theta prime is 45 degrees. So once again, I can use the unit circle. And I'm just going to use 45 degrees. Now I need to keep in mind in quadrant 4, x is positive, y is negative. So sine, which is y, is going to be negative. So sine of negative 45 degrees is going to be negative. And I'm just going to go to the y value of 45 degrees in the first quadrant, root 2 over 2. Part B, it's here. Negative 300 degrees, that's going to put me all the way into quadrant 1, I believe. Negative 300, negative 90, negative 180, negative 270, negative 300 is going to be here. Now, to get the reference angle, I'm just going to go negative 300 plus 360. $60 degrees. And I'm in quadrant 1, so everything's positive anyway. So secant of negative 300 degrees. If you remember secant, the definition is that is r over x. R is 1. The x coordinate at 60 is 1/2. Which becomes 2. Right, it's the reciprocal. In part C, I have to dip in your practice. Actually, I can go here. Part C. Is negative 90 degrees. That is right here. Well, on my unit circle, and by the way, they're looking for cosine of negative 90 degrees. Well, negative 90 degrees is down here. And if you remember, cosine is x. So what's x coordinate down at this point? 0. Now, I've left you some practice problems to do. I'd rather put too many than not enough. Feel free to do as many of them as you'd like, as long as you feel like you're getting good practice. All right, good luck.